So good evening, everyone. Brothers and sisters in the Dhamma, welcome to NDR. We're very delighted to have Lompo Kalyano with us this evening, all the way from Melbourne, together with the two venerables as well from the monastery. Tonight, the format will be a shrine side chat. Someone asked me, what's a shrine side chat? It's not a fireside chat because you're next to the shrine. So it's a shrine side chat, Q&A, on the autobiography of the life and the teachings of Lompo Kalyano, right? So today we'll make it informal and we'll ask Lompo to share excerpts of the book and deep insights of his experiences in the last many decades. Okay, so for those who may not be aware, there is a book called Peace from Within. This book, right, that's available here in NTR as well as at Wat Palelai. This is the newly published autobiography of the life and the Dhamma practice of Ajahn Kalyano. And if you have read the book in PDF and you may remember some of these stories and you have questions, you may ask them today. Okay, so tonight I'll start off with some questions to Lompo, and then that will kick off the session. So Lompo, it's a great delight to be part of, the editorial team of this book. Just a few questions to just kick off. Lompo, what have you learned about yourself and your practice writing this autobiography?
Oh, that's an easy one to answer. I wasn't born to be a writer, that's for sure. Not easy to do writing. So even setting up a microphone, sound system takes a little bit of practice. Writing a book takes practice, which is why I couldn't do it on my own. I had a number of the monks in the monastery where I live near Melbourne help. And then Beta and the editorial team helped to tidy up the initial drafts that we prepared in Melbourne. So as I said, I wasn't born to be a writer. I left university where I guess I did learn to write a bit. You do learn that skill to some extent. But then straight away I became a monk, and a forest monk in the jungle of Thailand. So the first few years I didn't do much writing as such, and in those days there's no computer, we didn't have a typewriter or anything. But out of faith in Luang Por Chah, my teacher, I wanted to know what he was teaching, and he spoke Thai and almost no English, so I began learning Thai. And one way I found that was useful to learn the Thai language was by translating his talks from Thai into English. First of all, the written word. So I wasn't doing that just to know the Dhamma, but it was also to learn the Thai language. They went kind of hand in hand. And then because I did more and more of that, then the Sangha invited me to actually translate talks that hadn't been translated before into English, and then some of those got printed. So some of the talks you might have read of Ajahn Chah, I did those translations. But in those days we all helped a bit as well. You always got other monks to read through what you've done, give you feedback, give you opinions. So I did write a bit, but when you're translating someone else's words, you don't. It doesn't matter so much your own ability with the written word. You're just trying to convey their message, not your own. Of course, if you can write good English or speak good English, it helps, because the idea is you're trying to get the Dhamma to people in their own language, say in English-speaking language. But that's my background as far as writing goes. My main occupation was, of course, practicing Buddhism as a monk. And to be honest, some of that time I spent clearing my mind out of lots of thoughts and opinions and knowledge of the world, letting it all go. And that was quite not easy, but the jungle in Thailand was quite conducive to that, because in those days, literally, you'd be cut off from the world. Things happened that didn't even know about. Like, I don't know if any of you are old enough. I imagine some of you are, like me. Things like the fall of the Berlin Wall. I didn't even know about it until about a year later, after it happened. Because at that time I was spending a lot of time just in the jungle, no newspapers, radio, or even any sort of discussion with anyone about news, and certainly not world news. So I didn't even know, the fall of communism, as it were, various wars, various events, sort of that are considered to be historic events during that period, say the late 80s, early 90s. Missed a lot of stuff because I was in the forest practicing, and I even at one point when I was staying at Wat Map Jan with Luang Por Anand, in the early days I was the only foreign monk there, so I was speaking Thai every day with the monks. And once in a long time I would be able to ring home because there was no phone, certainly no internet or anything like that. So once in a while, somebody arranged for me to make a phone call to talk to my mum, keep her happy. But she wasn't happy because she realized I was forgetting English. Because she was an English teacher. She went to Oxford and was very posh and proper and really had good command of the English language. And there's me in the forest in Thailand forgetting all kinds of very ordinary English words because I just didn't use them. And one of the teachings you'll all know, if you chant what we call the morning chanting, Pali into English, we say Sanya Anicca, memory or perception is impermanent. And I'm living proof of that. I was forgetting all kinds of ordinary English words. So that's my background. It's not a very good background for writing a book. But how the book came about was I was coming up to my 60th birthday last year, and it's just another birthday, another day in your life, of course. But in our culture, 60 is a kind of meaningful age, isn't it? Often it's the time people think about retiring from whatever the work they've been doing. In Chinese culture, it's fifth cycle. It's got a kind of auspicious. So there's a few cultural attachments we bring up with the number 60 and the 60th birthday. And then somebody suggested that I should write or collect together some memories of my life, otherwise they'll be forgotten. But 60 is also another significant fact about the 60 is you're getting old and maybe you won't last very long. So a few people on our committee, the monastery committee in particular, and the monks all thought, oh, it'd be a good idea if I wrote something down about my life, because they didn't know much. Over the years, I've shared a few stories, experiences, recollections, but not in any very deliberate way. It just comes out occasionally when you're teaching. So they thought I should collect things together so it wasn't lost, because memory is impermanent. You can forget things and then other people won't know. And they thought, well, because I'm a monk now living in Melbourne, I started a monastery there, and people come and learn the Dhamma with me. Maybe it were useful if they knew a bit more about my background and my personal practice. So that's how the project came about. And then because I'm not a writer and I'm not that good at it, I didn't even write it down to start with. We just recorded me talking about events and periods through my life. So it all started as audio, and then we got people to transcribe the audio, and then we needed people who knew a bit more about writing to actually compile it and edit it into a book. So that's where Beta and the team made their kind offer to help. So they're very much a group effort to produce this book. And in a way, as a monk, your life is a group effort. It sounds strange, and certainly that's not the way our society is nowadays. Everyone's trying to be a very individual, unique, self-made person, aren't they? And sort of that's what we want to stamp onto the world. I am an individual. I have my rights. I have my personality, my preferences. You know, our culture now is very much pushing that way of thinking. But as a monk, it's a bit, you know, you still have your personality, of course, your own collection of the five khandhas, your body, your mind, but your life is entirely dependent on other people. You know, from day one as a monk, you know, everything you wear, somebody has offered. Every mouthful of food, somebody else has offered, cooked it, made it, given it to you, shared it with you. The place you sleep, it's offered. You come, you know, I come here to NDR, and you know, the microphone, wobbly or not, is offered. Somebody is doing the sound system. Sound system is offered. The help is offered, volunteered. The place is offered. Everything as a monk comes from other people. So we have a joke, we say you're a bit like your public property, which has its good side, because it brings up a lot of gratitude and appreciation for me and other monks. And that is a good motivation to practice well, put effort into our practice, because we're receiving the kindness of others, the support. It brings up gratitude, appreciation, makes you try harder perhaps when you have the gratitude come up. But it does have its drawbacks, because if you think something that is public property, we don't always give the best respect to, do we? Like you see, you know, buildings or places that are public property, often everyone thinks it's someone else's responsibility to look after that place. So, you know, I know in Singapore you get fined if you drop litter, but, you know, sometimes you're not so careful with public property, or you get on a public train or bus, you know, it's not my problem, not my thing. I don't have to look after this, you know. Public property doesn't always bring the best way of thinking for people. So maybe monks as well, like we have a joke, you know, this public property joke, you know, often people see a monk and they say, oh, you're a Buddhist monk, you should be like this, or you should do that. Like total strangers will come up to you and tell you how you should live your life and what you should be doing and what's right, what's wrong, in a way they never do to other people. It's because you're public property. And it's not just Buddhists, you know, Buddhists will tell you how you should be and what you should do and what you should think, but also non-Buddhists who don't even understand what monks do and how we live, give you their 10 cents worth, their opinion. So there's the good and the bad, but the idea is you're a monk, you're here through the goodness and the support of the lay community, and that's the way the Buddha established the Sangha. You know, we're dependent on the kindness, the faith, the generosity of others like yourselves. And it's a two-way thing. Having received all this support, these the food, the support, the help, the advice, all the different things that people like yourselves give us, then we feel appropriate to give something back. What you give back will depend on you as a person. You know, some monks will give back in just trying to be a good monk through example, and they may not give formal teachings, they may not write books, they may not do much that's obvious in terms of giving back, but they're consciously trying to live their life as a monk in a good way, as a good example. And the practice of being a monk, you're practicing harmlessness. So you try not to harm people through your speech, through your actions. You don't kill, don't steal, you don't verbally abuse people, and even thinking. You're practicing abandoning your thoughts to harm others. That's a gift to the world. So you walk down the street, you're consciously trying not to harm other people on these three levels: body, speech, and mind. So that is a gift. Even if you don't say a word or do anything physically to help anyone else, just doing that practice, you're helping the world. And then, of course, some monks have a lot of knowledge, so they share that. We have teachings, meditation programs, give advice, give support, counseling, emotional support, all kinds of things. And as you know, and here, Ajahn Kalyano and many people will arrange all kinds of good projects, go and support orphans in Thailand and build monasteries and visit places and do all kinds of good things. So depending on each monk, each person, how they give back to the community, that's up to them according to their skills. But people felt, it'd be one way to give something back if I could write it down, get it down in a book, a bit of my life. And of course, you can't put a whole life in one book, but we put a fair amount in there. It's quite a fat book. Could have given more, could have put a few more stories in, but you have to draw the line somewhere. So it's just a small gift back to the community, people who have known me, practiced with me, supported me, giving something back to them. Of course, it's not even finished yet, because 60, you're old, but at the same time, you're not necessarily about to die. So my life hasn't ended yet. I don't know when it will end. How long I've got, I really don't know. And you live with that in your mind as a monk, particularly because every day you perform funerals, people come and make merit for the dead, talk about their own health problems or their sick relatives. And you go and visit people who are dying, and you see dead bodies sometimes. Even here we have a skeleton in the background there. So you get very used to death, and so it's quite normal to just think of in terms of, I really don't know how long I'll live. Maybe I'll drop dead tomorrow, or maybe I'll live another 10, 20 years, I don't know. So 60 is both you're old, and, when you're young, you look at someone who's 60 and you say, oh, they seem really old. But when you get to 60, you think, oh, I can still do a few things. It's not that old. Your perception changes, doesn't it, with your age? And probably when you're young, when you're a teenager or in your 20s, you look at someone who's 60 and you might say, oh, I'm never going to be like that. And then you reach 60 and say, oh, I became like that. So be careful, these perceptions, your opinions, your perceptions, the way you think about things, they change. And one big influence is, your body, your physical body as it ages. You will change how you think about yourself, think about the world. And then also how you go through life, you have experiences, you get to learn things, you get to know things. So when you're, say for me as a monk, when I was a monk for 1 or 2 years, I knew a little bit about Buddhism, I had my basic understanding, but I was very inexperienced. Now I've been a monk 40 years, oh, okay, I know a lot more. Simply by being here, I'm still here, I'm still a monk. So now I know a lot more about myself, practicing with my own mind and my own relationship to the truth of the world, or truth of life, and particularly the Four Noble Truths in suffering. What's its origin? What's the path of practice for the end of suffering? I know a lot more about that now than I did when I started. I know a lot more about teaching or relating to other people, because now I've been running a monastery for over 20 years. I know a bit more about that. And this year, I now know a little bit about writing books. And I know that I'm glad I didn't become a writer. That isn't my thing. But if it's useful, to write a book, then I'm happy to have done it and share something of my life with others. And that's the purpose, is to give something back and also to inspire or help people to understand better about the practice from one perspective. And mine is only one perspective. We're lucky now. There are a lot of Buddhist monks, nuns, and practitioners in the world, and communications is better. So you actually have access to a lot of information. Other people have their life story out there, and even translations. So like we have Ajahn Chah's biography and many other teachers. The Buddhist texts themselves, the suttas, the Vinaya, Abhidhamma, are there in many languages. So this is a golden age in terms of information and communication, particularly in terms of Buddhism and Buddhist teachings. There's so much available. That's our good fortune. So this is just one small contribution to the general availability of Dhamma in the world. And so if it's useful for people, good. If people read it, fine. Well, don't like this, fine. We give it away free. As someone said the other day, they said, "Oh, this book looks quite long, and it's going to take ages." Just read 1 page a day if you want. It's fine. That's often how I read Dhamma books. I just read a page at a time, take it away, think about it, see if it helps my practice, and then come back to it later. You don't have to read it all in once. But it's free. It's a free book. So if you don't like it, fine. You just give it to someone else. You don't even have to spend any money on it. That's the nature of Dhamma, isn't it? Dhamma is given freely, received freely, and you take away what you can from it. And if you find it inspiring, good. If you don't, never mind. Yeah.
Well, Longpo, there are 23 chapters in this book of 580 pages. Is there one chapter in particular that you found most difficult or most memorable when you have to recollect your 40 years of practice?
No, I think they're all much the same in that sense, level of difficulty. At the beginning, there was a little bit of a problem because, as I said, memory is impermanent. So as you're remembering things, it's, a bit here and a bit there, almost like a jigsaw puzzle. And you recall things, record them, and then someone was writing down, and then you realize you missed a bit. And I also had to go back, just check, make sure I was getting things in the right order. So there may even be a little bit of misremembering perhaps, but shouldn't be too much because we tried to check things. And then obviously memory is impermanent, and you can perhaps change events, details, facts. So again, try to not do that, try to check things and verify things as much as I could. But in a sense, it's just Dhamma teaching. So if something doesn't sound exactly right, well, just listen to it or read it and take it as it is. And if it doesn't seem useful or it seems wrong in some way, fine, that's fine. It's just freely given for people to make of as they wish. But just trying to get things in chronological order, make them accurate, correct, and double check with myself. This is something I had to do personally, just make sure what I was recalling was correct. because this is going back many years. Obviously, the earlier chapters about my earlier life, to just make sure. But the reason these are in there, these early chapters and events and things, is because they've stuck in my mind. There may be like periods or events that have been significant in me understanding the Dhamma or growing, or have helped me in some way to grow. Even when you suffer, you often grow from your suffering. So in that sense, it's all true. It's things that have happened to me in my life, and maybe it's of use to others, maybe not. It just depends on the person reading. But I'd say it's all equally easy or difficult, each chapter.
So Luang Por, you spoke a lot about your teachers in this book, from Luang Por Chah, Luang Por Tui, and many, many others. Would you like to share a few of these memorable experiences that you have with the audience before they touch this book?
Well, it's something you, particularly in the Thai forest tradition, not only in the Thai forest tradition, but the Thai forest tradition does emphasize the role of the teacher. Somebody either you ordain with them or you ordain somewhere else and come to live with that teacher. And the teacher plays a very important part in your practice, particularly in the early years of your practice when you're new. They're a role model, they're an example of how to practice. They're somebody who knows more than you do about every aspect of the practice, so particularly the mind, meditation, how to deal with obstacles in meditation, what are the correct ways of practice, what are the incorrect ways or ways that will be counterproductive or lead you in the wrong direction. They have that experience. So we always talk about a teacher is like, gold. They're like gold, striking gold. If you have a good teacher, they will help to save you from a lot of unnecessary suffering, fumbling around on your own, trying to work things out. Which from what I can observe, a lot of people practice in that way. They read suttas or they read books and they're kind of just picking and choosing and fumbling their way along, and maybe they don't get very far in their practice. A teacher can really direct you very quickly because they get to know you, your personal character, and they can see maybe what you need, what things will help you. They give you an example, and they're a living example that these teachings work. One of our biggest problems is doubt. We're doubtful, and I had doubt. Like before I met Ajahn Chah, my thought was these teachings are maybe dead to the world, in the sense what the Buddha taught that you find in the suttas, the Vinaya, is very good. I could see the wisdom of the Buddha, the depth of the Buddha's wisdom. But I also thought maybe nobody is actually practicing these teachings anymore. They just become something contained in books on a bookshelf somewhere, and they're not so relevant to modern life, as it were. But then meeting Ajahn Chah, and then after Ajahn Chah, meeting other teachers, I realized, there's a whole living tradition of people who have practiced what the Buddha taught, and not only practiced it, but realized had the same kind of realizations that the Buddha was pointing to, what we call Magga, Phala, Nibbana. Listening to them and living with them, which is important, because it's not just reading a book or hearing a talk, it's living with people who are embodying these teachings in the way they speak, the way they act, the way they do things. That, for me, I found that helped to give me a lot of confidence to give it a go myself. Because as you probably know, practicing Buddhism, there's always this sort of part of you is kind of holding back, isn't it? I've got my family, I've got my job, my health, I'm a bit old now. We've always got excuses and reasons why we're holding back in our Dhamma practice. Even just, maybe coming here tonight, you probably had some thought, there's something else I should be doing. That's normal, isn't it? You have all these excuses, other things competing for your time, your attention. So when you meet living teachers who are living that practice, doing it, and have also benefited from it, they're peaceful, they're wise, and you can sense that and see that by living with them, then you get a lot of confidence to do it yourself. And they tell you how they practice. You may not practice exactly the same as them, but you get the vague, the general idea. And there's certain qualities that they embody that you realize you have to develop as well. So commitment, sincerity, renunciation, dedication, effort. These sort of qualities that are not obvious from a book, maybe, because a book is just words, or even a spoken talk like this. You get something from it, but if you live with someone and you see how they live every day, then you get a really good impression. And then you're mentally, on the level of the mind, you're picking up this person. They're peaceful. Their mind is a bit different than the ordinary person. They're peaceful even when they encounter suffering, pain, difficulties, whatever. They don't just get angry or upset, or they don't get depressed or sad. They're dealing with the problems in a very skillful way. They have this sense of well-being. They have all kinds of understanding that they can share with you, encourage you. It just gives you more and more confidence. So I found that the Thai forest tradition is full of teachers. In a way, too many. Is like, oh, there's so many good ones, especially in the old days. A lot of them have passed away now, but there's a new generation as well. So I had Ajahn Chah, and he was my center, as it were, but then eventually he passed away. So I was lucky. I went to live with Luang Por Anan, who you know very well. He's another good teacher, and he's still alive today. But also there's other teachers that some I've mentioned briefly in the book that I actually live with, like someone like Luang Por Tui, Luang Ta Mahabua. Some I just visited, but maybe visiting occasionally, on and off over the years, got to know them a bit better. And one thing is, when you have a tradition with many well-practiced teachers and just monks and nuns who practice well, and they may not be considered teachers, but they're practicing well. You get to know them, you see them, you live with them. You get an incredible sense of this practice really works. It doesn't completely remove your doubts, but it removes a lot of them and frees a lot of your energy up. You say, oh, they're practicing. If they're doing it, I can do it. And you also get very good feedback. You get, if you meet different teachers, they always give you something, and sometimes it's some new angle on the Dhamma, or just emphasize one part of the practice that maybe you hadn't thought of or you'd forgotten about. Each teacher does that, so you get this whole rich kind of array of different experiences of hearing Dhamma, seeing teachers, listening how they practiced, how they've gone through their obstacles. So it brings your faith up. And at least from time to time, I think most of us need that. And just like, say, Singapore, you might say, oh, Singapore, someone was saying today, no forest monastery in Singapore. Okay, but at least from time to time, teachers come to visit, help uplift you. Or if you're meditating regularly, you'll notice if you're feeling lost, down, or if you start thinking of a teacher that you've met or heard, it can help bring you up quite quickly. So I'm the same. I've benefited greatly from living with different teachers, receiving personal teachings and talks, and just watching them, observing them, being close. Some of it's unconscious or on a level that, it's not just explanations. It's not quite the same, say, as university or college or education, where you receive lectures and explanations. It's also you live with people, someone like Ajahn Chah, you just feel the peace. You just walk into Ajahn Chah's monastery. Literally, the first day I walked in, it's like, woo, this is different. Ajahn Mahabodha's monastery, the same. These monasteries where these monks who we believe are arahants live, there's already something in the air. There's a tangible feeling when you walk into those places. It's not just a visual thing. Visually, maybe they're very ordinary. Forest monasteries are often quite ordinary. It's trees and some simple buildings, but they're not usually very ornate. Maybe more nowadays because there's a lot more Buddhist architecture around these days. But in those days, things were pretty simple. But there's this tangible feeling of peace that just kind of focuses you to the Dhamma. And that's just a feeling or sensation you pick up. How you pick it up, I don't know. Maybe it's just the mind, isn't it? Mind goes peaceful quickly, or you feel something. You also feel the kindness and compassion of people who have maybe abandoned anger. I mean, really abandoned anger. They just don't have anger anymore coming up in their consciousness. And that's an amazing thing, because most people will doubt. They'll think, well, anger is normal, isn't it? It's part of human nature to be angry. And we've got our excuses and reasons why we're angry. But to meet someone who no longer experiences anger, no more lust, no more fear, no more anxiety, it's a very rare thing. And you notice it, you feel something. It's still not you, and this is the thing you have to remember with teachers and other practitioners. They help you, they inspire you, but you still have to practice yourself. You have to remember that. You have to still do the practice. But nevertheless, you live with them, you're with them, or you get some very good example, and you try harder. Maybe that's one thing. You try harder. With Ajahn Chah there, you're sitting meditation, you try harder, you sit longer, you sit straighter. If you're caught up in a negative mood, you're more willing to work to let that go if you're right next to a teacher, or a teacher looks at you. Sometimes be massaging Ajahn Chah and the mind starts to drift away, and it's like, then you realize his eyes are looking right at you. It's like, oh. That saying, maybe it's a cliche now, where they say the teacher looked right through you. But that's what it's like. It's like, quickly want to let go of some stupid thought you had, or whatever the mental defilement is that's come up. You quickly want to let it go. So you try harder, you become more mindful, you're more energetic, put more effort in around the teacher. So some of the lessons you get are unspoken lessons, but they're very, very important lessons, I would say. And then the fact that there are several teachers or many teachers around, they sort of reconfirm things that you've learned with one teacher. You go to another teacher and you realize, what the first teacher was saying is correct, but you've seen it in another person and there's enough similarity, there's a sort of confirmation. Again, it's a fairly general sort of reflection, but it helps. Sangha, this is Sangha. It's a bit like, some of you have been to India, haven't you? You go to, maybe not all of you, but some of you have. You've been to India. If you go to Jetavana Monastery, where the Buddha lived for many years, and you walk around, there's these little brick ruins, and there's kutis, and they say, oh, Venerable Sariputta lived here, Venerable Moggallana here, Venerable Ananda was here, and the Buddha's kuti was there. And you sit there and you go, oh, wow. Imagine they're all in the one place, all these amazing arahants. The atmosphere must have been quite amazing, because they're all there and they've all practiced according to their own personality, but they've all had the same realization. They've freed their mind from what we call asava, kilesa, mental defilements. So they're like all living proof of the practice. And then in Thailand, in the forest tradition, and not just the forest tradition, having many good monks around that you can go and visit, talk to, listen to, you get the same sort of thing. You get this confirmation that it's true. What this Buddhist path really does lead to the end of suffering. Because unfortunately, you go around the world, there are those Buddhists who will say, "Oh, enlightenment is beyond us. That side of it is, from the past. It's no longer possible." But then you meet these teachers, you realize maybe it is possible. It gives you more inspiration and motivation to really try harder in your practice. As Luang Por Anand always says, when you're living with Luang Por Cha, when he was alive, sleep was never very delicious. Because when you're with a teacher, you don't want to be lazy and you don't want to indulge in sleep. You're putting forth effort. So that's just one simple reflection, but it gives you the idea.
So, Luang Por, you spoke a lot about teachings you received from others, right, from teachers. In a particular chapter, patience when you encounter suffering, you spoke about physical pain, swollen legs. Would you like to tell the audience a bit more of that story, please?
Yeah, I guess everyone has their karma, don't they? And some people will have one thing, another. My karma is a lot of leg karma. Seems, especially as you remember your life, you realize, oh, there's a lot of leg stuff coming up. So starting when I first began meditating when I was about 16, to sit cross-legged like this, I could sit for about 2 or 3 minutes. I just had intense pain from day one. And, my original thought about meditation was, I'm not going to be able to do it. It's too hard. It's too painful. Obviously, you can sit on a chair, but I wanted to try and do it like the Buddha, like various teachers. Just sitting on the ground was so painful, even with cushions. And when I began, I just stuffed in cushions every corner. And they used to call me Sai Baba. I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of Sai Baba. He has all these cushions around. So I'll be sitting there, kind of bobbling around, Sai Baba. And then we had a cat. I was a student. When I was a student, I was practicing meditation. We had a cat, and the cat saw all the cushions, so the cat would come in, and it's like, I just felt so hopeless. My legs hurt. And I had a girlfriend who could sit in full lotus as long as she wanted. But she never meditated. It was just, she was very supple and she could do that. And she could even walk around in full lotus on her hands. And she could walk up the stairs in full lotus. Some people are very supple. And I was thinking, I can't even sit cross-legged for more than 3 minutes. How am I ever going to learn meditation? So that was my first thought. And kind of the beginning of my story, my journey with my legs. Lots of pain. Luckily, I've never had much pain in my other parts of my body. My back has never really given me a problem, or shoulders, head, or anything, but legs, lots of muscle pain, leg pain, knee pain occasionally. So that was my kind of one of the things I was just working with the first few years as practicing as a layman, is just learning to sit still, because when you got pain, you wriggle, you move. I wanted to be able to sit still for a reasonable period of time. So I was just literally trying to build up my patience and the ability just to stay with painful feelings, 5 minutes. My goals were very, very kind of minor goals. Can I sit for 5 minutes cross-legged without moving? Can I sit for 10 minutes? So just go incrementally like that. Nothing very exciting. It wasn't like, oh, I'm about to get enlightened. It was just, can I sit for 10 minutes without moving? And can I, sit and be with pain? Because the pain would just come up so intensely. But gradually I did. And the first time I went to Thailand, I was not even sure if all of this is in the biography, but the first time I went to Thailand, I was a student and I was with a friend. And just before we went to Ajahn Chah's monastery, we went to Chiang Mai just for a couple of days to have a look, because we were in Thailand for the first time. and I was pushing and pushing myself in my meditation. My friend just wanted to go out on, sightseeing, which is fair enough, but I wanted to stay in the hotel, just in a little sort of simple hotel on the banks of the river, the Bing River in Chiang Mai. And I just spent my afternoons in the hotel rather than sightseeing. And I'd sit and sit and sit. And then I had this breakthrough on the third day in the hotel, and my mind went really quiet. All the pain disappeared, and I could sit for about 50 minutes without moving, not even quite an hour, but just under an hour. And I had a really, deep, profound meditation, and it seemed like my mind gathered together and I couldn't feel my body anymore. So, and that was after quite a few years of meditating. So I finally thought, this is working now. I can actually experience a bit of peace, a bit of samadhi. So I got a lot of inspiration from that. But I'd worked up to that, taken many years of effort. Of course, when I went to Thailand, I also learned walking meditation for the first time. I met a monk in Bangkok, and he taught me walking meditation, and straight away I found that very helpful. And obviously, if you can walk and sit together, then it's another way to manage pain. Because if you're really in pain, well, you can at least walk. And I found I got very peaceful and very mindful from walking meditation. So that those two things, once I could sit a bit longer mindfully, and then I could walk mindfully, that's probably what led me to think I can be a monk. Because before I could sit, I was thinking, I can't be a monk. I'm not going to be able to sit, as you see monks sitting like this. And it's like, oh, I'm never going to be able to do that. But once I could do some sitting and then some walking, I could probably be a monk. And then I went to Ajahn Chah's monastery, and I just followed the monk's daily routine and was sort of gradually cutting away the doubts. 1 meal a day, I had a doubt about that, but okay, eat 1 meal a day, it's all right, didn't die. Sit meditation with mosquitoes all over the place. I thought, oh, this is terrible. But, again, well, I didn't die. So, okay, I can do that. My last doubt was the all-night meditation, which is that they used to do quite religiously. We used to do it once a week because Ajahn Chah really emphasized that, and he used to lead it in the old days. So I thought I'd better learn to do this. And luckily they didn't make you sit the whole night without moving. You could walk if you want, you can change posture, but you had to stay up all night, once a week, meditating. You catch up on sleep the next day, say. And I thought that's a big doubt. Am I going to be able to do that? So within a few days of going to the monastery, they had the first all-night session. It's always on the new moon, the full moon, the 7-day moon day, the Buddhist holy day. That lay people would come in like yourselves. Many of them be working. Some were retired, some were working. They'd come into the monastery, keep the 8 precepts, listen to a talk, do chanting, and then they'd stay up. Many of them would stay up the whole night meditating. A few of them would even go to work the next day. It's amazing. So when I saw that, I was young, I was 20, from London, reasonably fit young man. And a lot of the people who came to the monastery were older people, 50, 60 years old, 70 years old. And they could sit up all night. I'm sure they had pain as well, and they had to put up with whatever I put up. And none of them were perfectly healthy, and a lot of them were older, but they could do it. So once I saw that, the first night, I could sit for 1 hour, and then I just had to spend the whole night walking meditation. I couldn't sit, so much pain. In those days, there's not nice cushions like this. It's just concrete. Concrete, you have a little piece of cloth you put down, and you just sort of sitting there, hoping for the best, listening to a talk in Thai you can't understand, doing chanting in Thai that you can't understand, and then sitting the whole night with mosquitoes biting you. I thought, oh, this is going to be a test. But I could do it for an hour, and then I just did walking meditation. But every time I had a doubt, I looked across at all the grannies. Oh, they're sitting there. They can do it. If they can do it, I should be able to do it. I'm much younger, stronger than them. If they can do it, I should. So I just scolded myself to stay up all night. In the morning, I thought, well, if I can eat one meal a day, I can sit there with mosquitoes biting me, I can go out on Bindabat, then I can probably be live the monk's life. So that the morning after staying up all night, I followed the monks out into the village on their alms round. I was just wearing white with a shaven head, but I followed them. And when I got back to the monastery, you walk for about an hour, you come back, a bit tired, dusty, sweaty. I got to the monastery gate and I thought, I can do everything that is required of the monk's life. So far as I understood, I'll be able to do it all. So then I made my vow, or we say adhitthana, made my determination at the monastery gate. I said, I can do it all. I'm going to become a monk, and I'll just do it until I'm enlightened. And a wave of rapture came up. I thought, oh, this is good. You can even have rapture and samadhi arise when you're walking into a monastery, not even doing walking meditation or sitting meditation, but all the rapture and the bliss came up at that moment from making that adhitthana. So from then on, I kind of didn't look back. I said, I'll just do it. And here I am today, still here. So don't give up. If you have a bit of pain in your meditation, it's very normal. Just work with it. Just be patient.
We don't want to give too many stories away so that people will read the book.
Oh. I can't even remember what's in the book now. Some are in, some are not.
That's one next to you, Longpo. Right.
Oh.
So Longpo, you ended the book on the birth of Bodhipala Monastery. It seems to be an expression of continued faith. Would you like to talk more about continuing the faith?
Well, it seems to be the way Buddhism has gone, isn't it? Since the time of the Buddha himself sent the first 60 arahants out and said, spread the Dhamma for the benefit of the many. And so they went around, in those days, they went around India, some north, some south, some east, west. Buddhism, the Buddhist teachings spread with the Sangha. So this is the important thing, the Sangha preserve the teachings best. It doesn't mean to say the lay people don't have a role. You do, you all have a role to preserve the teachings through your practice, your faith, but the Sangha tend to be the ones who take the teachings. And we all know, even monks coming from China, going over the Himalayas, taking the teachings to the north, coming to the south, across to Sri Lanka. And, there's been monks continuously living in Sri Lanka now for over 2,000 years. So there's not many institutions in the world that can compete with Buddhist monasticism. Monks, nuns, these robes, we call them the banner of the Arahants, have been worn continuously for 2,500 years. And there's not many other dress codes that have stayed unchanged like that. So Buddhism has gradually spread first around Asia, as you know. And it's quite possible Singapore 2,000 years ago or 1,500 years ago had Buddhists coming and going here. We know in Malaysia there were. So you're not the first Buddhist in Singapore. There was probably Buddhists on and off quite early on, even though obviously there's been different historical eras. Maybe Buddhism wasn't very strong in the colonial era, whatever, but Buddhism has spread around Asia for hundreds of years because now it's spreading around the world with internet, global travel, people like ourselves, maybe starting in a Buddhist country such as Thailand, learning how to practice as a monk and then being invited to other places. So just the Ajahn Chah Sangha has dozens of monasteries and associated monasteries around the world. And then, of course, many other teachers, other traditions as well. So now Buddhism is spreading all over the place. And, I was invited after many years in Thailand. I went to live near Melbourne. It's just because there were people there who wanted a forest monastery, had enough faith to buy the land, invite me, just as has happened in many other parts of the world. And I've been living there with the Sangha and laity practicing near Melbourne for 22 years. But a few years ago, an offer came to buy land in Adelaide, which is another city. I don't know if you know Australia, but it's about 1 hour's flight from Melbourne, about 800 kilometers away by car. And they had 1 or 2 Buddhist temples there already, but there was a demand or an interest for Ajahn monks to go and teach. I'd taken many teachers, some who have been here before, like Lumpur Liam, been to Adelaide before, and so the offer came to buy land to start a forest monastery on the edge of Adelaide. It's about 4.5 years ago, 5 years ago. And that's how Buddhism and the teachings of the Buddha continue. We call it the turning of the wheel. So the Buddha himself used this image of the Dhamma being like a wheel. And it turns, it keeps rolling, doesn't it? Meaning it keeps moving into wherever there are places with people who are interested to find out the way to free themselves from suffering, who want peace, who want happiness, which basically the whole world, wherever you go in this world, I find people who are interested in what the Buddha taught. They're interested in meditation. They're interested in learning how to be more peaceful, more content, more happy in themselves. So the latest monastery we're building near Adelaide, Bodhipala Monastery, is just another expression of that. It's just another turn of the wheel. As long as people are practicing according to the Eightfold Noble Path that the Buddha taught, then it's like this wheel will keep turning, because it's a very powerful, you might say unstoppable. It's not unstoppable, but what stops the wheel turning? Well, it's people's own mind turning away from the Dhamma, our own confusion, our own arguments and distractions and getting lost in the world. And, we know there's a lot to get deluded by in the world. But as long as people are still turning to the Dhamma, respecting, have faith in the Dhamma, listening, learning, practicing, well, it's like that wheel will keep turning. So I guess there'll be more monasteries arising in the world, over time. So this is just one that I've been involved with.
One final question from me before we open the floor for questions and answers. So Lumpur, how would you recommend readers enjoy this book and use it as practice to develop peace from within?
Any Dhamma book, there's different ways you can approach it. I explain, I think, at the beginning, it's not an explanation of the suttas or something like that. It's not expounding on the Buddhist texts. It's not that kind of book. It's just very personal description of things that I've encountered in my practice, obstacles I've encountered and how to get over them. Because that is one approach. I'm not saying it's the only approach. We do need to go back to the texts, study them as well. We do need to listen to teachers in a formal setting and do meditation courses and all the other things we do as well. But we also need, the more personal, down-to-earth sort of aspect of Buddhism, because a lot of people, they always tell me, I don't have time to learn Pali. Don't have time to read all the texts. Can you explain it in ordinary language? You might say, common people's language. So it's that kind of approach, just talking in very ordinary ways about the practice. There are some Dhamma terms in there, but they're explained and there's references. But it's basically just saying, this is one human being who's come into the Buddhist Sangha practice. This is what I've encountered. This is how it's gone for me. If there's anything useful in that, there may be some shared experiences or something that resonates, makes sense with you. Well, that may help you, inspire you. It may not. Some people have read it cover to cover in a day or two. I guess it was readable enough for them to do that. Others just read a little bit and then put it down, and that's fine. As I said earlier, I often read Dhamma books just a little bit at a time. Like even Ajahn Chah, I go back to his teachings over the years, the same old teachings I'm still reading that I was reading 35, 40 years ago, and I still get something out of them. But I often read just one page or one section, not just trying to read cover to cover, just read enough to get a reminder of something or get some fresh insight or a new insight into something. And I read enough to feel stimulated, energized to do a bit more practice. Then I go away and do some sitting or walking. So that's one approach to books. I would read to support the practice. That's how Ajahn Chah taught. That's how Luang Por Mun taught. I think if the Buddha was here, he would teach much in the same way. He wouldn't say we're not just studying and learning for the sake of it. Buddhism is not just like a university subject that you have to learn and pass an exam and then you have your certificate. It's for you to bring into your own heart, into your own life, learn from what the Buddha taught, but then you have to translate it actually into your own experience of your own mind, your thoughts, your feelings, what you're doing, the choices you make, karma. All of this, you're using the books, whether it's this book or any other book, or talks that you hear. Your job then is to take away what you've heard and start comparing your own experience with what you've heard and learning from your own experience, but you use the teachings you gain as a guideline. That's how I've done it, and it seems to work. But with books, you can always go back to them and read them a second time, and you may get something new, and that's an important thing. Sometimes you have to be willing to take your time with a book, read a bit, think about it, go back, read a bit more. I would say that's quite a good way to approach it, rather than just reading to sort of fill in the minutes or the hours. But it's supposed to stimulate you to practice yourself. And in the long run, that's where you're going to get deepen your understanding. If you can learn to do some meditation, sitting, walking meditation, keeping precepts, whether it's 5 precepts, 8 precepts, or even maybe some of you can ordain one day, shave your head even, maybe, or at least go on retreats and things like that. That's the idea. It's to push you to practice more for yourself and to realize you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to have the perfect body and mind, the perfect conditions. Like, I'm just like you. I was brought up in a city, London, had an ordinary education, went to school, went to uni, ended up living in the Thai jungle, getting eaten by mosquitoes. And everyone can do it. Everyone can practice. You just have to start with who you are, where you are in your life, and then you start from there. That's your raw material. My raw material is not much different from yours, I think. You just have to do it.
Those are very generous insights from your own experience that you shared with us, Luang Por. Perhaps now we can open the floor for questions and answers from everyone.
Sure. Yeah.
Do you have anyone who's got a question? Just got to put your hand up and we'll bring the microphone to you. And for those who are on the Facebook live streaming, Oh, if you do have a question, you can also type it out and we'll read it out. Anyone's got a question? Okay.
I'm asking on behalf of the one of the Facebook questions that in the book, Long Po did mention that he was once accosted by a bear in the Thai forest, and how Long Po actually overcome the fear. Thank you.
Like anything else, you have to get to know it through developing your own mindfulness and then investigate. Try to understand what fear is, what's going on. And that's cumulative. You gain cumulative experience, understanding, increase your strength of mindfulness, and then understand the nature of fear, how it arises, what it is, what it does to you, and then how it passes away. And so that's why I did spend a lot of time going out into the forest, meditating, and sometimes I was in places with all these wild animals. It's just one way you encounter some of the fear and the attachment that underlies fear. And what is fear? It's fear of pain, fear of death, fear of the unknown. And it's coming from your, you might say, automatic attachment and identification with your body, your feelings and emotions that come up, your thoughts. So sometimes you have to put yourself into those situations. You have to confront fear if you're going to know it. You have to confront these things. How much you take on, how quickly, how much, that depends on each individual, and you can't always rush into things. So like the first time I went to stay in a forest where there was wild animals, I didn't sleep a wink the whole night. And after a few sleepless nights, you really start thinking, why am I not sleeping? What is the problem here? You're just anxious, thinking, oh, this may happen, that may happen. What's that noise? What's this? What's that? You feel both, you're aware of both the physical changes, your heart rate increases, you're more jittery, there's adrenaline, etc. And then there's also the thoughts that come with it, and the thoughts, the imagination takes over, and it's, what if this happens? What is that? What is this? I was a great worrier, and anxiety and worry. I was a specialist in that. So I literally couldn't sleep a wink the first night I was staying in a forest like that. You just keep looking at it. What is this? It's just thoughts. It's just certain feelings. It's just your heart going quicker. But, there's nothing very solid in any of that. There's nothing real. And of course, nothing happened. I'm not saying nobody in the whole of history of mankind has never been attacked by a wild animal or whatever. But most of the time, people are not attacked. These things do not happen. It's just your imagination, isn't it? You're projecting, like with so many things, fear of flying, fear of spiders, fear of a person. So many of our fears are just, we are projecting onto a situation, filling in a void, filling in the unknown. And as you start becoming more mindful and investigating that, you realize, oh, this is self-manufactured suffering. And if you could take that all away, like you sit there, literally, I've been sitting on the floor of the forest, hear a few animals moving around, and I was thinking, if I took away all this fear, what's the problem? Just sitting here, it's quite pleasant. The forest is quite pleasant at night. It's cool, peaceful. These animals, as far as I can see, they're not that interested in me because they don't usually eat me. They're eating other stuff. So what's the problem? And you just question your fear. You become aware of it and you know the symptoms of it, but you also question it. And little by little, you're teaching yourself to go beyond it and say, this is not helpful. It's not helping you. It's not helping the bear or the tiger or whatever it is. And this is just manufacturing suffering for yourself and maybe others. It's just a useless way of looking at things. It's understandable why we have it, but it's not for your benefits. So you start letting go of those kind of thoughts, and you accept, well, okay, if I've made bad karma in the past, and this animal I'm encountering at this time is, if I've hurt it in the past, well, maybe it will come back and hurt me. If I've made those causes and conditions, it's going to happen, whatever. So I'm not going to waste a lot of time thinking about it. I have no aversion, ill will towards animals, but I accept if they're going to attack me, they're going to attack me, whatever will be. You find a way of thinking that is bringing your mind in line with reality, but removing fear and imagination from the situation. So with bears, like the first time I met a bear, he was running at me full speed, because that's what they do when they see a human in the middle of the forest at night. They see you may be a threat to them, so they'll usually run straight at you to scare you and just to show you that they're ready for a fight. To be honest, I've encountered that many times with humans, because I grew up in South London, and young South Londoners running at me quite a few times in my youth. So that wasn't that different. So it's like, oh, bear is running towards me. So all I did was stand there the first time it happened and watched myself. And, the adrenaline comes, the heart starts beating. But I had not the slightest thought of ill will or hatred towards the bear, because the bear is just doing bear things, going around the forest. In a way, I actually felt apologetic. It was like, yeah, I'm walking meditation. I was walking meditation in the moonlight, so I didn't even have a light. I was using the moon. I was just walking up and down, and the bear starts charging towards me, and I could tell it was a bear because they have a certain way of running. They kind of bob up and down, quite big. And I just thought, yeah, maybe I'm disturbing you. I'm walking here. I'm the one who's the visitor. You're just doing your usual thing in your usual place. So I felt apologetic. I didn't say anything, but that's what I was thinking. I wasn't thinking anger or fear, really. I was just thinking, oh, I'm sorry, I'm here, just a monk doing my thing. So I was thinking that, the bear came up and it stopped right in front of me. It is the way bears do. They kind of go like this from side to side. I just, here I am, And then he decided he's not going to attack me, and he ran away again. Just as fast as he came, he ran away. And yeah, sure, the heart was beating very fast. The adrenaline came up. The fear wanted to arise, but I just used reasoning, the calm of the mindfulness, because I was already quite peaceful walking back and forth. I used the Dhamma to deal with the fear that came up, and it subsided very quickly, and I just had compassion for the bear. I wish you well. They run off into the night, wish you well. Another time, a bear came and he was walking slowly. He was looking for food in the forest. And this time I was sitting meditation. And I was really peaceful, and I was focusing on the Dhamma at that time. I didn't want to interrupt my own meditation, but it's going very well. It's when your meditation is going well, you don't want to stop. So I was like sitting there, and I knew some big animal was coming right up. I thought, no, I'm here to meditate. I'm not bothered about you. I'm just going to do my meditation. So I made that choice in that situation. So in that situation, no fear arose at all. That's a bit later in my practice, and maybe I'd learned to let go of fear better by then. But no fear arose, but I knew something was there, but it's like, no, I'm just going to keep focusing on my breath, the arising, passing away of sankharas. And the bear comes up, and they've done what other animals have done. They kind of sniff you. So you kind of know what's going on. I wasn't completely absorbed in samadhi. I could still hear, but I didn't open my eyes, and I didn't get involved with it out of choice. I said, I'll just sit here and watch. And it just came up, sniffed, obviously didn't like what it sniffed, and walked off. And he sort of gradually walked off. He didn't seem too upset. He walked off slowly. So I just carried on sitting just to teach myself, okay, bear comes, bear goes, whatever arises, passes away. That's what the Buddha taught. Everything that arises passes away. So I was just proving that to myself in that situation. Just as fear arises, passes away, sound arises, passes away, smell arises, passes away, thoughts arise, pass away. Just focused on that. And the bear went, and I just back to normal. I just don't think about it. And then 10 minutes later, my friend came down the hill. Oh, there's a bear here. You didn't see the bear. There's a bear. Making a big deal out of it. I just said, yeah, I knew there was something there. I didn't know for sure it was a bear, but that might be the more normal reaction. You see a bear and you talk about it and you make a big deal out of it, don't you? Nowadays you put it on YouTube, TikTok. But the Buddhist monk is just bear comes, bear goes. No big deal. That's your aim, really. It's just to be very ordinary with these things, not falling into fear, not making a YouTube video. You're just a bear. Okay. So you're learning like that. And mainly in the forest, just practice a lot of compassion. Nowadays, it's just automatic. I meet animals, even in Australia, we have koalas, we have wombats, we have snakes and things, and you just feel sorry for them because the life of an animal is much worse than our life. So rather than fear, you just feel sorry for beings who are suffering and maybe are not able to get out of their suffering very well. That's the normal response I have now. But in the beginning, it was all fear, worry.
Questions?
Hi Ajahn, thank you for your teaching. I have a question. Does the arahat or the enlightened one still get clouded by their thoughts and emotion from time to time?
Well, as far as I know, what the Buddha said and what teachers like Luang Por Chah said is no. They've mastered their thoughts and emotions. They mastered their mind. They've purified the mind of all greed, anger, and delusion. So they still think. They can use their mind, but the way they think is not the way an ordinary unenlightened person thinks. The ordinary unenlightened person is prey to their emotions, thoughts. Greed, anger, and delusion is constantly causing trouble, confusion, endless trains of thought, happiness, sadness, all the problems that come with the untrained mind. The one with the trained mind chooses to think or not. So they mastered their mind. If they want to dwell in emptiness or peace or samadhi, they can. If they want to consider something, to teach people or teach a person, or this guy, what's his problem, get to know it, they can. They can direct their mind to know things, think about things. They can still speak, they can still listen, they have language. But their mastery, they have mastery of their mind. It's a total different thing. So of course they're totally at ease and peaceful in themselves because they're not being pulled around by endless emotional changes, reactions, trains of thought. They're not sitting there thinking, why did I think that? The way the most meditators are. They're in charge. There's somebody in charge. You might say, well, there's no self, so who's in charge? It's just the training. And the pure wisdom and compassion is in charge. So if there's some need to be compassionate in a situation, well, compassion may come into their thinking and they do something, they help someone or teach somebody. But they also have complete stillness if they want. And they just go to stillness, and that's how they survive in a way. When Ajahn Chah was very ill and in a lot of pain in his last few years, and everyone would come in those days and say, how does he survive like this? It's just miserable, eating food that's totally tasteless. having no kind of pleasure or interaction with people. He stopped talking. He's just lying there or sitting in a chair. That's it. That was his life. And yet he seemed to be totally in control and totally peaceful. How can he do that? How can he endure the pain of the degeneration of his body? And there was a lot of pain. How could he endure all that? Because he's got mastery of his mind. When he was free, when nothing much was happening, he could put his mind into a place of stillness, jhanas. When he had to be with his body, he would be experiencing pain, but he's not manufacturing aversion or attachment out of that pain. He's just knowing it. It's painful. So incredible endurance, but not creating any suffering out of experience. So it's different. The Arahant no longer suffers with conditions. They know things, but they don't experience reactions of a suffering. So there's a sort of separation. He said, the mind of Arahant is like oil and water in a bottle, meaning they're in the world, the water, and then the oil is there as well, but they're separate. Oil and water in a bottle, they naturally separate. The mind of the Arahant is in the world, but separate at the same time. So it's a bit hard to imagine for the ordinary unpracticed person. How can you be separate? You're here, you think, you feel, you sense things. You're always reacting. But of course, if you trained your mind, maybe you'll realize, oh, there's also this way where you're completely separate. You see something pleasant, but it doesn't give rise to desire. You experience something unpleasant, but it doesn't give rise to aversion. The mind is equanimous. And that's something in the end you can only know through experience. We can describe it, talk about it, but you've got to experience it through the practice. And that's why we say, do some meditation, because very quickly you can experience a bit of equanimity when you're calm. Thoughts arise, but you're letting them go. You're just seeing them as they are and letting them go rather than getting lost in them. If you experience a bit of that in your meditation, you start to get a taste of what the Buddha was talking about. Or pain in your body. If you're more mindful as you meditate, you may feel some pain, but you're not reacting with aversion. You just know, pain, yeah, it's painful, it's unpleasant, but you don't create any suffering out of it. You just know it. So we may get little glimpses of that in our meditation, and that's giving you a taste of the direction you're going in your practice. And if you keep practicing, those glimpses will become more manifest and more profound for you.